we didn't get a call from Cathy Engelbert. Did y'all call Caitlin Clark? Did Cathy Engelbert go and address social media when Tiffany Hayes was inciting fans to physically harm her off the floor? Did y'all go and do this whole victimhood thing when Maisha Hines-Allen stood up for her Indiana Fever teammates in the first game versus the Phoenix Mercury, and she was called all type of coons and names online because of it? Did y'all do all of this then?
There's a moment happening right now in professional basketball where the rules seem to change depending on who you are, where your star player can be physically targeted on court, facing threats that should terrify any organization, and your head coach stays silent. But the moment someone online criticizes coaching decisions, suddenly there's a press conference. Suddenly there are statements about toxicity and hate and the moral failings of the fan base. This isn't about protecting players. This is about choosing which players deserve protection and which ones get thrown to the wolves. This is about an organization that's willing to sacrifice the loyalty of the people who made them financially relevant just to avoid accountability. And what's about to be exposed will make you question everything you've been told about the Indiana Fever, Caitlin Clark, and who's actually in control of this narrative. Because what we're looking at isn't just a coaching decision or a press conference. What we're looking at is a calculated system designed to silence criticism, protect certain narratives, and make sure that nobody asks uncomfortable questions about who's really in charge and what the actual priorities are.
It's hate nonsense, and it is absolutely unacceptable. Most of this coming from the online community. Most of this, in my heart of hearts, I believe, not coming from WNBA fans. Indiana Fever fans. I believe that this is people who are using our league, using our players to further divisive agendas. It's not acceptable.
You might as well try to throw Caitlin Clark's name in there. It's very obvious what you're doing. It's very, very obvious what you're doing, and it's nasty. I'm disgusted with what you're doing right now. You have never once stood up for Caitlin Clark like this, besides that whole little fake podium rant you tried to go on.
Stephanie White stood at that podium knowing exactly what she was doing. This wasn't some spontaneous moment of a coach defending her players in the heat of passion. This was deliberate. This was strategic. This was planned.
Yes, we have to continue to protect our players. We've got to continue to support our players in our league. We get to play a basketball game. And AT was exactly right. We get to play a basketball game. And yes, that's going to come with criticism. Yes, that's going to come with fans and the love-hate relationship that they have with players and teams. That is going to come. But it's not hard to not be a jerk. And if you are one of these...
Y'all take everything...
She called a press conference, and instead of addressing the real problems that have been crushing her team all season, she spent her time lecturing the online community about toxicity and racism and divisive agendas. But here's what makes this so revealing, and this is the part that changes everything. She created a distinction that matters more than anything else she said. She separated real Indiana Fever fans from what she called people using the league to spread division. That's not accidental language. That's not a casual comment made in the moment. That's a wall she built intentionally, and on one side she put the fans she approves of, and on the other side she put everyone who doesn't fit her vision. And she knew exactly who she was talking about when she made that distinction. The frame
booed her. The fans can't boo. The fans can't do anything without y'all crying and complaining. But you know what y'all do take? Y'all take all the new money from the fans. Aaliyah Boston got her $6 million from the fans. Alyssa Thomas making $1.4 million this year from the fans. Y'all want to throw Caitlin Clark fans and call them racist and all of this stuff all the time, but you want to cash the checks that they play part.
Was brilliant, actually, in a deeply problematic way. She talks about inclusiveness. She talks about elevating marginalized communities. She talks about how their league is about values and social responsibility. All important things, sure, but here's the trap she set, and it's a trap that's been working perfectly all season. If you disagree with how she's handling things, if you want the focus to be on basketball and competition instead of agendas, suddenly you're on the outside. You're not a real fan, you're not part of the community, you're the problem, you're the toxic one. You're the one creating a hostile environment. You're the one who doesn't understand what the league is really about. That's how you silence.
Y'all can't force everybody to be all into that. This is supposed to be a basketball league, bro. Y'all are trying to turn it into something else. And anybody who's not a part of it seems to be an outsider within the league. They seem to be treated like outsiders.
Including and being inclusive of all different walks of life. That is what our league has always been about from day one. That is what our league will continue.
This league has been an NBA charity league also. Say that. You want to throw Caitlin Clark fans under the bus? This has been a
criticism without actually addressing anything that was said. That's how you make it so people are afraid to speak up because they might get labeled as something worse than just wrong. they might get labeled as harmful. And notice what she's careful not to do. She doesn't defend the fans who have legitimate complaints. She doesn't acknowledge that some of the criticism being leveled at her is valid. She doesn't say, I understand why you're frustrated with coaching decisions and I'm going to address those. No, she goes straight to the nuclear option. She invokes racism, she invokes homophobia, she invokes hate and toxicity. She's saying that if you're not with us, you're a bad person. And once
crazy, you know what's crazy? Y'all really doing all of this over random accounts on X or Threads or whatever that have Fred Flintstone or SpongeBob or Michael Jordan as their profile photo, talking crazy to y'all. Y'all getting mad about random profiles that have 4 followers and they're following 10,000 accounts. You're mad at these. All of this is over random profiles talking crazy to y'all on Twitter.
you frame the conversation that way, once you make it about morality instead of basketball strategy, it becomes almost impossible to have honest conversations about what's actually happening on the court. Think about the position this puts a fan in. You want to criticize a coaching decision. You want to say that benching your star player in a crucial moment was a mistake. You want to point out that the offensive system isn't maximizing talent. But now you have to do it knowing that if you say anything, if you engage in that conversation, you might be labeled as part of the problem. You might get lumped in with anonymous trolls and actual hate speech. And so what do fans do?
When there's a lack of communication, the void is filled with negativity, right? I think, being able to communicate, being able to be the one who reaches out first is important. So yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I would love, if I was in that situation, I would have wanted to hear from the league. Look, none of us can control social media. The things that we can do to minimize it. Some of us are in better position than others. Myself as a...
It's crazy that we didn't hear none of this social media stuff when Tiffany Hayes was encouraging people to harm Caitlin Clark off.
They either stay silent or they get louder and more frustrated, which then gets used as evidence that they really are the problem. It's a perfect closed loop of control. It's a system designed to make sure that Stephanie White never has to answer real questions about her coaching. This press conference happened at a specific moment for a specific reason. The Indiana Fever had just finished a season where they underperformed dramatically relative to expectations. They had the Rookie of the Year, they had a generational talent, they had roster pieces that should have resulted in playoff success, and they barely made the playoffs. That's a coaching failure. That's a clear, undeniable failure of leadership and strategy. When that reality started becoming impossible to ignore, when fans and media started questioning...
Put whatever we can in place, I think, to support, to help, and then from a human standpoint, checking on one another. Checking on one another is important too.
Yeah, man, I am disgusted with Stephanie White, man. Stephanie White doesn't have it in her to support Caitlin Clark through and through. She really doesn't. At the end of the day, she's on the side of Alyssa Thomas, as clear as day.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Whether Stephanie White was the right coach for this team, the response wasn't to improve. The response wasn't to make adjustments or show growth. The response was to attack the source of the criticism. The response was to shift the narrative from why didn't this team succeed to why are these fans so terrible, and the genius of it is that it might actually work. It might generate positive headlines about a coach standing up against online toxicity. It might make her look like the principled one, but it doesn't change anything about what actually happened on the court. It doesn't fix the coaching mistakes. It doesn't explain the questionable decisions. It just moves the conversation to a place where Stephanie White is comfortable, where she's the victim instead of the person responsible for underperformance. But let's talk about what Stephanie White didn't mention at that press conference. Let's talk about what she's been silent on all season long. Let's talk about the moments when actual harm was happening and she said nothing. Tiffany Hayes posted content that encouraged people to physically harm Caitlin Clark. We're not talking about online arguments here. We're not talking about mean tweets. We're not talking about people being rude on social media. We're talking about actual calls for violence against a player off the court in the real world. We're talking about threats to physical safety. Where was this press conference then? Where was the emergency statement from the league office? Where was Cathy Engelbert, the WNBA commissioner, calling to check on players' safety when actual threats were being made against one of the league's biggest stars? The silence was deafening. And that silence tells you everything you need to know about what the league actually prioritizes. Because if protecting players from hate and toxicity is really the issue, if that's really what this is about, then why wasn't there an immediate response when Tiffany Hayes posted that content? Why didn't we see a coordinated effort from the coaching staff and the league office to shut that down and make it clear that threatening violence against players would not be tolerated? The answer is uncomfortable because it reveals that this isn't actually about protecting all players. This is about protecting certain narratives. This is about managing perception. This is about controlling the conversation. And it's not just that one incident with Tiffany Hayes. That's just the most obvious example. Caitlin Clark spent her entire rookie season facing physical play that went beyond what basketball should be. We're talking about flagrant fouls that should have drawn suspensions, that should have triggered league investigations, but instead went downgraded or ignored. We're talking about treatment that would have prompted immediate action in any other context, but was just accepted as part of the game when it came to Caitlin. The fans saw it. Every single game, they watched their generational talent getting roughed up by defenders who seemed to have explicit permission to play outside the normal rules. They watched plays that would get other players ejected happen to Caitlin with no consequences. They watched the physical toll it was taking, the way it affected her rhythm and confidence, and they expected their coach to stand up and say enough is enough. But Stephanie White, she didn't make those calls. She didn't demand accountability from the league office. She didn't go on record saying that her star player was being treated unfairly. Instead, she benched Caitlin. Multiple times during games, she pulled her out. And the message that sent to everyone watching was crystal clear. Keep your head down. Don't make waves, don't complain about fouls, don't push back against physical play. Maybe if you just accept what's happening, if you just absorb the punishment, it'll stop. That's not coaching, that's not leadership, that's capitulation dressed up as strategy. Think about what that does to players psychologically. You're a generational talent, you're breaking records, you're the reason this organization is relevant again. And your coach is benching you, presumably as a way to manage the situation to keep you safe, to send some kind of signal. But the signal it sends is, I'm not confident that I can protect you or advocate for you, so I'm just going to limit your time. That's not the message a star player needs to hear. That's not how you develop confidence and chemistry with a coach. And here's where it gets even more revealing. Remember when Miesha Hines-Allen stood up for her Indiana Fever teammates in that first game against Phoenix Mercury? She showed loyalty to her organization, defended her teammates, stuck up for them when things got physical. And what happened? She got attacked online with racist slurs and degrading comments that should have been absolutely unacceptable in any professional environment. We're talking about the kind of hate speech that should have triggered immediate league action. Did Stephanie White call a press conference then? Did the league office issue a statement condemning those attacks? There was nothing. Complete silence. Radio silence, as if it never happened. But here's the thing that makes that silence even more damning. Miesha was defending Caitlin. She stood up for Caitlin in that game, and the backlash she received for that loyalty, for that support of a teammate, was severe. So the message that got sent to every player in that locker room was clear. If you stand up for Caitlin Clark, if you defend her, if you show loyalty to her, you're going to get attacked. You're going to get called names. You're going to get targeted. And nobody in the league office is going to protect you. Nobody is going to call you and check on you. Nobody is going to issue a statement. You're on your own. Is that how you want your players to feel? Is that the environment you're trying to build? Because that's what actually happened, and Stephanie White said nothing. The league said nothing. The only person who had to live with the consequences of standing up for Caitlin was Miesha. This creates a chilling effect. It tells players that defending Caitlin Clark is dangerous. It tells them that loyalty to a teammate can come with serious personal consequences. It tells them that the organization won't have their back if they do. And then, when fans point out that something seems off about this dynamic, when they notice that certain players are being protected and others aren't, they get told they're toxic. Here's where the hypocrisy becomes so impossible to ignore that it's almost laughable. Aja Wilson just got a $6 million contract extension this offseason. $6 million. That's more money than most players in WNBA history ever made in their entire careers. Alyssa Thomas is making $1.4 million this season, which is the highest salary in WNBA history. Record-breaking money. Historic contracts. These unprecedented salaries didn't materialize out of thin air. They exist because of one thing and one thing only: record-breaking revenue. Historic financial growth. Money pouring into the league from television deals and sponsorships and ticket sales at levels the WNBA had never seen before. And where did that revenue come from? The fans. Specifically the fans Stephanie White's now standing at a podium lecturing about their behavior. The fans who filled arenas to capacity for games. The fans who made television ratings spike to historic highs. The fans who bought merchandise and tickets and drove every single financial metric that made these contracts possible. The fans who made the Indiana Fever relevant again after years of struggling attendance and minimal media coverage. The fans who showed up in droves, who supported the team, who created the buzz and the excitement and the cultural moment that transformed women's basketball. Now think about this for a second, because this is where the trap becomes undeniable. The exact same fans who are now being called toxic, who are being separated from real fans, who are being accused of using the league to spread divisive agendas, Those are the fans who made it financially possible for these players to earn salaries they never could have earned otherwise. These fans created the economic conditions that led to Ja Wilson getting $6 million. These fans made it possible for Alyssa Thomas to sign the first $1.4 million contract. These fans are the reason the WNBA can now offer life-changing money to women's basketball players. That's not a small thing. That's the entire foundation of the financial growth the league has experienced. But the message being sent is crystal clear. You can participate financially. You can buy tickets. You can watch games. You can drive up television ratings. You can create the demand that justifies these sponsorship deals. You can be the reason these players earn these salaries. Just don't have opinions we don't approve of. Don't criticize coaching decisions. Don't question offensive systems. Don't point out when your star player isn't being protected. Don't suggest that maybe the coach isn't the right person for the job. Do that and suddenly you're not a real fan. You're not part of the community. You're the problem. This is the game being played, and it's been designed perfectly to silence anyone who dares to ask uncomfortable questions. Because once you've made fans dependent on feeling morally acceptable, once you've made them understand that their participation is conditional on their approval of every decision you make, you've essentially won the argument before it even starts. They can't criticize without feeling like they're bad people. They can't voice legitimate concerns without worrying that they'll get labeled as toxic. Stephanie White wants to benefit from having Caitlin Clark on her roster. She wants to enjoy the sold-out arenas. She wants the national television coverage. She wants the increased salary cap that comes with a generational talent on the roster. But she doesn't want to actually stand up for her. She doesn't want to be the coach who goes to bat for her star player when things get rough. She wants the benefits without the responsibility. And when the fans who made all of this possible ask why, when they voice legitimate criticism about how Caitlin is being managed, she tells them they're toxic. The WNBA's entire financial success this season can be traced back to one thing: Caitlin Clark. The financial transformation happened because of increased interest in the league, and that increased interest happened because Caitlin Clark joined the league as a rookie. Before her arrival, the WNBA was stagnant in terms of viewership and revenue growth. It was a league that was financially struggling, fighting for relevance. Then Caitlin shows up and suddenly everything changes. Suddenly there's national media attention. Suddenly there are sold-out arenas. Suddenly ticket demand is through the roof. Suddenly television ratings are at historic highs. That attention, that interest, that demand, that's what drove the financial growth. That's what made it possible for players to get record contracts. And the fans who drove this transformation, the fans who came to watch Caitlin play, who created the interest and the demand, who made all of this possible, those are the fans being told they're toxic. Those are the fans being separated from real fans. At what point does that become indefensible? Think about what Caitlin Clark is experiencing right now, and try to put yourself in her shoes for a second. She's a rookie in the WNBA. She just finished her first professional season. She's already broken records. She's already transformed the league's financial situation in ways that are honestly staggering. She's already dealing with unprecedented scrutiny and physical targeting, and a level of pressure that most players never have to face in their entire careers. She's dealing with media attention that most rookies never experience. She's dealing with fan expectations that are almost unreasonable. She's carrying the weight of an entire league's financial future on her shoulders in a way that no one person should have to. And the one person who should have her back unconditionally, who should be in her corner no matter what happens, who should be her greatest advocate and protector, is her head coach. The head coach is supposed to be the person who stands up for you. The head coach is supposed to be the person who says, "This is my player. This is my team. We're not going to treat our players like this." The head coach is supposed to be the person who shields you from some of the pressure and creates an environment where you can just focus on playing basketball and developing as a player. But Caitlin can't say any of this publicly. She can't go on camera and express frustration with her coach. She can't say, "Actually, I wish you had defended me more fiercely. I wish you had stood up for me the way you're standing up for other players." She can't publicly disagree with her coach. That would violate the code of professionalism. She has to maintain professionalism. She has to pretend unity. She has to keep her head down and do her job, even when the person leading her team isn't fully supporting her. That's the position she's been put in, and it's incredibly unfair. It's not fair to her as a player. It's not fair to her as a person. But here's what's important: the fans see it. They watch every single game. They understand basketball at a level that casual observers don't. They see the moments when Stephanie White could defend her star player and chooses not to. They notice the pattern of behavior that suggests maybe the coach isn't fully invested in building around her most talented player. They watch her get benched in crucial moments and they don't understand why. They watch the coaching decisions that don't make sense from a basketball perspective. They watch an offensive system that doesn't maximize her strengths. They watch a defensive system that leaves her exposed. And they come away understanding that something isn't right with the coaching situation. This creates a specific kind of resentment, and it's important to understand that this resentment has almost nothing to do with the things Stephanie White is talking about at that press conference. Fans aren't angry because they're racist. Fans aren't angry because they're trying to spread divisive agendas. fans aren't angry because they're toxic or hateful. Fans are angry because they care deeply about Caitlyn's success, and they can see obstacles being placed in her path by the very people who should be removing those obstacles. They're angry because they understand that this team has the talent to be incredible, and the coaching is preventing that from happening. They're angry because their favorite player isn't getting the support she deserves from the person who should be her greatest advocate. And when Stephanie White turns around and tells those fans that they're the problem, when she tells them they're toxic and hateful, when she tells them they don't understand what the league is really about, it only increases the resentment. The foundation of a player-coach relationship is trust. Trust is when a player knows that their coach has their back. Trust is when a player feels confident that their coach will defend them, support them, and advocate for them. Trust is when a player looks at their coach and sees someone who's on their team fighting for them, protecting them. Trust is earned through consistent action over time. You demonstrate that you care about your players through your decisions and your words, and your willingness to go to bat for them. What message has Stephanie White been sending about her trust in Caitlyn? What message does it send when you bench your most talented player in crucial moments? What message does it send when you don't defend her publicly against unfair treatment? What message does it send when you lecture fans about their behavior instead of standing up for your star player? The message is clear. The message is that the coach doesn't have the same kind of trust in Caitlyn that she has in other players, and Caitlyn notices. On some level, she understands. She knows that her coach isn't fully in her corner. She knows that her coach is more focused on managing narratives than on protecting her, and that affects the relationship. That affects the dynamic in the locker room. That affects how a player performs. Let's talk about what real leadership actually looks like in a situation like this, because it's important to understand what's missing from Stephanie White's approach. Real leadership means protecting your players first, not selectively, not based on who fits the preferred narrative or what's politically convenient, but all of them. All the time, no exceptions. When your star player is struggling, when she's facing unprecedented scrutiny and physical targeting on the court and threats off the court, a real leader steps up publicly. A real leader goes to press conferences and says, "Not on my team, not to my player, not happening. I don't care what the pressure is or what the consequences are, we're going to protect this player." Stephanie White had countless opportunities to demonstrate this kind of leadership throughout the season. Every single time a questionable foul went uncalled against Caitlyn, that was a moment to speak up. Every time a flagrant play was downgraded or ignored, that was a moment to demand accountability from the league office. Every time Caitlyn faced criticism for things that other players do routinely without comment, that was a moment to stand up and say, "This is unfair. We're not accepting this. My player deserves better than this." But she didn't do any of those things. She watched it happen. She made adjustments in response, which sometimes meant benching Caitlyn, which sometimes meant changing the system. And she saved her righteous indignation for defending other players against mean tweets from anonymous accounts with cartoon profile pictures. The contrast is stark and absolutely impossible to miss if you've been paying attention. When Alyssa Thomas made comments about not hearing from the league office, when other players started talking about needing support and protection and communication, suddenly there were coaches and players lining up to validate those concerns. Suddenly the entire conversation shifted to how important it is to support your players through difficult moments. Suddenly everyone was talking about the need for communication and outreach, and making sure players feel protected. All valid concerns, absolutely valid, no argument there. But where was that energy when it came to Caitlyn Clark? Where was the unified voice saying we need to protect our star player? Where was the demand for better officiating when she was getting fouled constantly? Where was the statement about player safety when she was facing physical targeting that went beyond normal basketball? Where was Stephanie White saying, "This ends now, nobody treats my player like this"? You didn't see any of that. You saw the opposite. You saw selective protection. You saw certain players being elevated and championed while others were left to fend for themselves. And when fans pointed out the inconsistency, they got told they were toxic. Other coaches in the league have handled similar situations differently. They didn't attack their fan bases. They didn't lecture about online toxicity. They didn't try to separate fans into categories of acceptable and unacceptable. They handled the basketball side of things. They made adjustments. They explained decisions. They took criticism as an opportunity to improve. They didn't use their media platform to attack the source of criticism. When there's legitimate concern about a team's direction, when there's criticism about coaching decisions, you respond with basketball answers. You adjust systems. You improve. You don't respond by lecturing your fan base about their moral failings. Stephanie White's approach is unique in how defensive it is. It's unique in how quick she is to blame external factors, the online community, toxic fans, people trying to spread divisive agendas, rather than taking responsibility for coaching decisions. And that approach is telling you something about her confidence in her own decisions. If she felt good about her coaching, if she felt confident about the decisions she made, she wouldn't need to spend so much time defending against criticism from the fan base. She would just let her coaching speak for itself. Real leadership requires consistency. It requires treating all players with the same standard of protection. It requires being willing to go to bat for your star player even when it's difficult, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it might create conflict with the league office or other coaches. It requires prioritizing your players' well-being above your own political convenience. And Stephanie White has not demonstrated that kind of leadership. How does an organization get to this point? You're a team with generational talent. You have unprecedented interest from fans. You have unprecedented financial support. You have everything in place to win. And you barely make the playoffs. The only explanation is organizational dysfunction. The only explanation is that somewhere along the line, the priorities got mixed up. Somewhere along the line, managing narratives became more important than winning basketball games. Somewhere along the line, protecting certain agendas became more important than protecting and developing star players. The roster was questionable. Why would you build a roster around a generational talent and then not give her the pieces she needs to succeed? The offensive system didn't maximize Caitlyn's strengths. It actually limited her impact in ways that confused everyone watching. The defensive schemes left her exposed to constant physical play and rough treatment. She was getting beat up on the court and the system wasn't protecting her. She was being placed in positions where she was vulnerable and nobody seemed to be adjusting to help her. The game plan wasn't working. The adjustments weren't happening. The coaching wasn't good enough for the talent on the roster. And this dysfunction doesn't usually fix itself. It usually gets worse. It usually leads to more decisions that don't make basketball sense. It usually leads to more conflicts and more dysfunction. Because once you've prioritized narrative management over winning, it's very hard to go back. You're trapped in a cycle where you have to keep defending the previous decisions instead of moving forward and improving. You have to keep blaming external factors instead of looking in the mirror and asking difficult questions about what you could do better. You have to keep building narratives instead of building teams. And meanwhile, the talented players on your roster are watching all of this and wondering what's really going on. They're seeing a coach more focused on optics than on winning. They're seeing an organization that cares more about certain narratives than about basketball success. That's the environment Caitlin Clark is being asked to thrive in. That's the situation she's dealing with. That's what organizational dysfunction looks like from the inside. The WNBA has been given an incredible gift with Caitlin Clark. They've been given a generational talent who has the ability to transform the league. And instead of maximizing that gift, instead of building around her and supporting her and helping her succeed, the league is managing narratives around her. The league is selecting which of her fans get to be considered real fans and which ones get rejected. The league is prioritizing other things over her development and success. And that's a fundamental mistake that could have serious long-term consequences. If the WNBA continues down this path, if it continues to prioritize narrative management over the sport itself, it will eventually lose the fans it needs most. It will lose Caitlin Clark's fans. It will lose the people who came to watch basketball because they care about basketball. And what will it have in return? A league that's smaller and less relevant and less successful. Caitlin Clark is not stuck. She might be tied to the Indiana Fever right now contractually, but she has options. She's popular enough that any team in the league would want her. She's talented enough that she could succeed in multiple systems in multiple organizations under different leadership. And if the Indiana Fever don't figure out how to properly support her, if they don't make changes that show they're serious about building around her, someone else will. Stephanie White can give all the press conferences she wants about online toxicity and league values and the importance of protecting players. She can stand at that podium and talk about inclusiveness and marginalized communities and the need for better behavior from the online community. She can make it sound like she's the one defending players and the fans are the ones causing harm. She can create a narrative where she's the principled one standing up for values. But until she demonstrates the same energy in actually protecting and supporting Caitlin Clark, until she shows that she's willing to be the coach that Caitlin needs, those words ring absolutely hollow. Actions matter infinitely more than speeches. Results matter more than rhetoric. And right now, the results suggest that Caitlin Clark deserves better than what she's getting from her head coach. She deserves a coach who stands up for her the way Stephanie White has stood up for other players. She deserves an organization that values her contributions and her development instead of taking her for granted. She deserves leadership that has her back unconditionally, not selectively based on what's politically convenient or what fits the preferred narrative. And the fans who support Caitlin deserve honesty. They deserve a coach and an organization that respects them instead of lecturing them about their behavior. They deserve recognition for what they've contributed to the league's success. They deserve to be treated like valued members of the community, not like the problem. They deserve an organization that appreciates their loyalty and their financial support instead of rejecting them because they don't fit a particular narrative. The next time you see a headline about Stephanie White defending players, about the importance of support in communication and protection, remember this moment. Remember that she had countless opportunities to demonstrate those values with her own star player and chose not to. Remember that she saved her passionate defense for everyone except the person who needed it most. And ask yourself, is this really the leadership that's going to take the Indiana Fever to a championship? Is this the coach who can build around a generational talent and maximize her potential? Is this the person Caitlin Clark needs in her corner? From where the fans are sitting, the answer is crystal clear. Stephanie White has made her position clear. She's more concerned with policing fan behavior and managing narratives than with actually developing her star player and winning basketball games. She's more interested in virtue signaling about inclusiveness and values than in creating an environment where Caitlin Clark can thrive. She's willing to throw the fans who made the season financially successful under the bus if it means deflecting criticism from her own coaching performance. The question now isn't whether Stephanie White will change. History suggests she probably won't. The question is whether Caitlin Clark will accept the situation or demand better. And if you've been paying attention, if you understand how these dynamics work, you know that generational talents don't stay anywhere they're not fully supported for very long. Something is going to have to give. Either Stephanie White changes or Caitlin Clark moves on. And when that moment comes, when this situation finally reaches its breaking point, remember that you saw this coming. Remember that it was always predictable based on how things have been handled from the start. Remember that the person who should have been protected all along was the one who made this entire thing possible. And remember that choosing narratives over basketball, choosing agendas over winning, is a choice with consequences. The WNBA will learn that lesson sooner or later. The question is whether they'll learn it before they lose Caitlin Clark and everything she represents. Because what's happening right now, what's being revealed through this press conference and this entire situation is fundamentally about priorities. It's about what matters most. If protecting a narrative matters more than protecting your generational talent, if managing fan perception matters more than actually winning basketball games, if political convenience matters more than basketball excellence, then you've already lost. You might not realize it yet. The losses might not show up on the scoreboard immediately, but you've already lost the thing that matters most. You've already made the choice that's going to haunt this organization for years to come. That's the real story here. That's what nobody wants to talk about directly, but that's what's actually happening.